Hello, I am back with some watercolor today. It's been actually a really long time since I was able to do watercolor. I definitely haven't done a long video, and it's been, honestly, has it been a year? Almost a year? In December. I think the last watercolor video I made was like in December. So, due time to do watercolor again. Because I actually love watercolor. I find it to be one of the most relaxing mediums to work with. It's very forgiving compared to other types of mediums. And it's just fun. It's just relaxing, and it's not too expensive. So if you mess up, it's not as big a deal because a little bit of watercolor goes a long way. So Phoenix Art Materials actually sent me a little watercolor palette, so I will be trying that out in this video and testing out those colors on a couple of different types of paper. I have Moleskin, mixed media from, I think, Canson, and they sent me a watercolor canvas, which I have never done watercolor on a canvas before, so it'll be an adventure for all of us. Here is the canvas that I'll be using later on in the video. I've never seen a watercolor canvas before. I didn't even know they made watercolor canvases because canvases are not super absorbent. That's kind of the point of them. So I was very interested to see how this would end up working with the watercolor. So I did do the watercolor canvas as the last segment in the video because that's the most elaborate design and that's the largest design. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised by my experience working with the watercolor canvas. I'm used to working with paper, which is obviously more absorbent. Took a little bit of getting used to switch to the watercolor canvas, but a lot of aspects of it were positive. So one of my favorite things about the canvas is it didn't get warbly. A lot of times with watercolor, it ends up taking me a long time because I have to wait so long for the paper to dry so it doesn't rip or curl up on itself, but because it's on the canvas, it didn't warp or ripple at all. And I'll go into more detail towards the end when I'm actually painting on the canvas, and you'll see what I'm talking about in more detail. But yeah, just as a first impression, it didn't warp, it didn't peel up on itself, it didn't cause the paint to bead up or pull any of the canvas up. It just stayed nice and clean the entire time and very consistent the entire time. And it actually did allow for layering, which I wasn't sure. Being a canvas and not a piece of paper, I wasn't sure how well the layering would be. It's definitely different from layering on paper, but you could layer and it didn't cause any damage to the canvas, which was great. Yeah, so to start off with, I'm going to show you what colors came in this palette. And I personally, when I get samples from different companies or when I get new art supplies, I like to have a swatch page because they always come with a swatch page, but printed colors are always going to be different than whatever pigment you actually get. Let's say you have a paint tube and you buy another paint tube. There's a chance that it's not going to be the exact same color. So it's always a good idea to do new swatches when you get new markers. So I just like to do that. That's the first thing I always do when I get new colors. All of the watercolors came wrapped up, so I unwrapped all those watercolors, and then I decided to cut out the little labels and make myself a little guide and then add little watercolor swatches underneath. And you can kind of see what I'm talking about, like it shows the color that's supposed to come in it, and then I painted the real color underneath of it, and it's pretty close, but it's not exactly the same because it's just printed ink always is going to look a little bit different. So my first impressions of this watercolor set were all positive. All of the colors are very vibrant, and I really like the colors that they chose. There's a really nice variety of colors. It covers pretty much all of the colors that I would want for quick mixing or just mixing in general. I was really happy with the color choices that they had in this set. A lot of sets will have extra blues or extra purples, but they'll be lacking in other areas, whereas I felt this set has a really nice variety of yellows, a really nice variety of reds and pinks, and then a nice set of blues, and then also additionally greens. And one of my favorite parts of the set were the neutrals and the gray tones. Those colors particularly I found very helpful and very effective for mixing, because a lot of the color mixing that I do, it's just very helpful to have those neutral colors to be able to mix quickly and not have to mix it myself every single time. So yeah, overall I really liked this set and I really liked the colors that they chose. Once I got all of the swatches done, I like to normally draw something next to the swatches using those swatches. So for this particular instance, I decided to draw Emily Wilde because I recently listened to the Emily Wilde books. I'm still on the third one. I haven't listened to the third one yet and I'm loving them so much. So let's draw a book character today because I want to draw more book fan art. I like to read a lot. I just never draw fan art for them. Most of the people that look at my art, I don't know how much they would actually know the books that I read or really care, but maybe they do. So if you want to see more book fan art, let me know because I'd be very happy to draw more of that. So a little more information specifically about the palette that I am using for this video. Like I said before, it is from Phoenix Art Materials. It has 24 colors. It's definitely on the more professional side of watercolor kits. A lot of watercolor kits I've used in the past have more colors, but they're not the same types of colors that you would see in professional kits. A lot of the professional kits have a lot of similar colors like raw umber, yellow ochre, burnt umber, Payne's gray, cerulean blue. A lot of these colors are going to pop up in a lot of professional sets, so that's one thing that I immediately noticed about this kit. It has a lot of high quality colors, high quality pigments. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge about watercolors and professional watercolors, but a lot of these pigments are made in really specific ways. Like, I believe burnt umber is made from a specific type of clay. So these are pretty standard colors as far as professional kits go, and it does have an awful lot of colors that I recognize. So right off the bat, I did like that about this set. I wasn't familiar with this until I got this set, but apparently number 447 cerulean blue is a higher quality than a lot of other sets. I myself don't have too much experience using cerulean blue specifically for watercolor, but apparently a lot of other watercolor professionals said that that color specifically is pretty high quality in this set and can be a little tricky to get your hands on in some other sets. Also, if you do decide to get this set or a similar set, you can get half pans, so you don't have to buy the entire set. You can just buy some of the colors. And like I said before, you don't need a lot of pigment to cover a lot of space and to mix a lot of colors. A little bit of watercolor pigment goes a long way. So this was a little different for me painting on Moleskin. I don't normally paint on Moleskin. I usually paint either on mixed media, paper from Canson, or Canson watercolor paper. But for this I used Moleskin. It's obviously not going to be quite as absorbent as watercolor paper, so you have to be a little more careful with how much water you use, because I tend to use a lot of water and then just do lots of layers as opposed to getting more pigmented mixtures and painting them on the page so you can do less layers. I just tend to use lots of like super watery layers and layer them on top. So depending on how you prefer to do watercolor, your paper requirements are going to change a little bit, but I didn't have issues painting on the Moleskin. Also, I was a little nervous because it was looking a little ripply in the middle, but it dried fine. It's not really too warbly either now that it's dry. For the line art, I used Micron. I always use Micron for watercolor. I always think Micron is the brand, but Pigma Microns, that's what I always use. I don't really have them bleed. As long as you let them dry for a little while, I don't have them bleed with watercolor, unless you're like really just like pouring water on it maybe. I've had them bleed with markers before, like alcohol markers, but not watercolor, so I always do my lines first. I know some people do their lines second. It makes me feel safer to do the line work first. One thing I will say about watercolor is if you have no idea how to mix colors, you have no idea how to do color theory, watercolors are a really great place to start because you learn how to mix colors. They're not super expensive. By the time I finished all the drawings for this video, there's hardly a dent on the actual palette. So a little bit of watercolor goes quite a long way, which is why I definitely recommend it to beginners or anyone that just wants to learn color, because it's easy to experiment and it's just not a high stress situation. Because I don't really clean my palettes out either. Like on the side here, you can see they have the little metal thing on the side, the little metal palette mixer. I'll just let it dry and then I close it up. One thing you do want to make sure is that you do let it completely dry, because I had one watercolor palette a while back that I wouldn't let it completely dry before I would put the lid on, and then it did get moldy, which wasn't like visibly moldy, but it smelled weird, so I cleaned it out and haven't had any issues since. So now whenever I have a watercolor palette, I just make sure that it completely dries out and then you can close it up. And if you do want to clean it later on, you can just mix some water and then wipe it off, so it's pretty easy cleanup. Plus I don't always wash my brushes either. I'll just rinse them in the water cup and then I'll just kind of move on with my life. Whereas normal paint, if it dries with the paint on it can ruin the paintbrush. But for watercolor, if you have some watercolor left over in your brushes, even if it's a couple days later, if you just put water on it again, it'll come out fine, or a little bit of soap. Watercolors are really great for beginners and for learning how to mix colors. And this is my finished Emily Wilde portrait. I quite like how she turned out, and it was just quite fun listening to the book and drawing her at the same time, because I don't really do that. Like I said, I don't really draw fan art for books, so if you want to see more book fan art, let me know. I think maybe I'll do a book club. I would love to do a book club and like talk about the book while I draw characters. That would be so fun. If you guys want to see it, let me know. So then here I decided to record a little bit of this because I had drawn it a couple weeks ago, and I decided, oh, I'll just record it while I watercolor it so that you can see what it looks like on the mixed media paper that I normally use. So this is Canson XL mixed media paper, and again, Pigma Microns first, and then I just went in with the watercolor and I colored the sketch that I had drawn a couple weeks ago that I just haven't gotten around to coloring yet. because I have a bullet journal, which is like a planner scrapbook cross between. I think it was originally designed for people with ADHD when you're like have too many thoughts in your head and you just need to jot them down. So that was like the original concept of a bullet journal, but now people have turned them into kind of like fancy journal-y things. But anyway, I digress. Back to the point. I drew this because I went to see the Hidden Inventory movie that was in theaters, so I was like on that page I wanted to put this, and then it's been weeks and I just haven't had time to color it. So now it's colored, and yes, here we are. So now for the final drawing, this is the big drawing. This is the one that I'll spend the most time on. This is the watercolor canvas from Phoenix Art Materials, and I have never painted on watercolor canvas. For me personally, it was a very different experience because normal watercolor paper absorbs the watercolor and then it dries, and then if you add more water on top, it doesn't really move it around too much. It can, depending how much water you have on there, but for this, it's more waterproof than watercolor paper, so it didn't get warbly or anything. I could put as much water on it as I wanted, but it also didn't quite soak in the same way, so that took some getting used to, and I had to change the way that I paint a little bit, because like I said before, I like to paint with a lot of water and not as much pigment, so I had to kind of switch to using a bit more pigment and less water, because layering just wasn't quite as effective on this type of canvas. If I messed up and I just added water to it, I could scrape it off, because that happened a few times where I drew with watercolor and I was like, this is just too dark, so then I just added water and then it just wiped right off. One thing I will say, I'm very sketch oriented. Like, I have to have guidelines, I have to have sketch lines before I go in and paint something or before I go in and add the line art. That wasn't really easy to do on the canvas. I wouldn't really recommend doing that because you can kind of still see the bits of gray rubbed all over the canvas, and I just really couldn't get it up. I tried erasing with a kneaded eraser, I tried erasing with the normal eraser, and yeah, I couldn't really get it up. But that's just because I drew with pencil and I probably should have known better, and halfway through I realized, but I'm incapable of drawing this type of thing without guidelines, so I just was like, well, it is what it is. There's gonna be pencil lines no matter what. So by the end, I think you can still see some of them, but it's fine. It doesn't look too bad by the end of it. So for this final drawing, I'm drawing some stuff from Witch Hat Atelier. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to look up how to pronounce it. Okay, that French guy, you know, the French guy that has pronounced literally every word on the internet. There's not a single word that I've googled that this guy has not pronounced. Couldn't tell you his name, but you know. If you know who I'm talking about, then you know who I'm talking about. Like, I will Google it. He will pronounce it for me. It'll be great.
Atelier is how it's said in French.
I regret picking this as a drawing subject because I don't know how to pronounce it. Atelier. No, that's not right. Wait, let me Google it again. Atelier. Okay, let's Google it.
American pronunciation, atelier.
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 That sounds so American though. But you know what? I am American, so it's fine. Atelier. We're not pronouncing it the French way. We're going with the American way. Atelier. Anyhow, Witch Hat Atelier. That still sounds wrong. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting distracted. But I love this series so much. It's got some of the absolute most beautiful artwork that I have ever seen, and the storyline is phenomenal and the characters are phenomenal. I love it so much. Anyhow, I just caught up on all the physical volumes, and so I've been wanting to draw it for like a month now, a couple months, and this was the time I was like, you know what, let's do a magical watercolor with Witch Hat Atelier. That's still not right. Is it Atelier?
Atelier.
Atelier. Witch Hat Atelier. Okay. I'm gonna pronounce it wrong again by the end of the video, and I apologize. I have this problem. I read a lot, and so I listen to more audiobooks now, so it's not as bad. But I used to read a ton of books, and then I would have the pronunciation of a word in my head, and for some reason assumed that that was the way to pronounce it. And then I would like confidently use it in public, and people would be like, what are you trying to say there? Because that is not it. And yes, the worst was with the Percy Jackson books, and I like pronounced all of the Greek gods wrong. I started talking about them to my brother, and he's like, what are you saying? Like, for instance, this one's so embarrassing, but that's okay. So there's Poseidon, right? I pronounced it Poseidon, and I was like, oh, Poseidon, and my brother's like, what are you saying? What are you doing? And I was like, That's embarrassing. Especially because, like, some of them I knew how to pronounce it outside of Percy Jackson. But in the context of Percy Jackson, for some reason, my brain did not connect the two names. I don't know. But anyhow, so I have a track record of pronouncing things incorrectly that I read and then have, like, firmly rooted in my head. Or from, like, manga characters, I'll be like, oh, this is how you pronounce it. And then I hear them pronounce it in the anime and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not what I've been saying this whole time. So I've been working on Googling it before I get the wrong pronunciation like locked into my brain these days. This was such a side note. Back to the video at hand. Witch Hat Atelier. Atelier. I'm not gonna try saying it anymore. Coco was easy, at least. Anyhow, I'm getting so distracted. I apologize. Back to the video at hand. I drew the sketch, and then I did all of the outlining, and again, canvas is not great for outlining, which I kind of knew. I knew that going into it. I was like, this is gonna be an issue with the outlines. It's probably gonna look bumpy and weird. And it kind of did, but I just was not feeling an entire drawing with no lines. I just prefer drawing with lines most of the time, especially because I wanted to do like scenery and stuff. So I did all the micron outlining first, and then I went in and painted it, which I did have a little bit of smearing, but that was when I tried to do like a wash over top of it. It did not work out super well, which you'll see towards the end. Probably mention it again, but for the most part, I didn't have any issues with that, except for the fact that the lines are kind of bumpy, which I did go over top of some of them at the end and kind of smooth them out a little bit, and I think that helped. Also, a lot of my microns are kind of drying out, so I think that was part of the reason that I was having a little bit of trouble with them on the canvas, because I had a gray one, which is not as dried out because I don't really use the gray very often, and that went on a lot smoother. So, I don't know, maybe it was the black. But if you're not familiar with this series, it's basically about this little girl named Coco who is really intrigued by the idea of magic, and she thinks you have to be born as a witch in order to become a witch, and so she's sad because she wasn't born a witch, obviously. Her mother and her are visited by a witch one day, and he's trying to solve a problem for someone, and she's like super intrigued, so she spies on him while he's doing it and realizes there's a special method behind it that involves like drawing, and anyone can be a witch, but they keep it very locked down because they don't want nasty people running around drawing whatever kind of magic they want. So anyhow, she ends up getting adopted into this atelier, little group of witches, and so she ends up living with some other little witches in training. That's the premise, and then she's learning about the world of the witches, and it's kind of all about how they have this very black and white view of like who should and shouldn't use magic, and what's the correct way to use it, and what's sort of the abuse of power, and then it kind of goes more into a gray area the further you get into the series, where Coco's kind of questioning like maybe these rules aren't the best, because she understands why they have the rules, but then at the same time they could help more people if they did things a little differently, but that could also cause more problems. So it's a really interesting series, and the artwork is absolutely stunning. It's got mushrooms, it's got like little tree stairways and tree houses and all kinds of little fantasy styled houses and villages, and it is just, oh, and little fantasy creatures. It's beautiful. It's honestly easily like top 3 most beautiful manga series I have ever read in my life. It's so beautiful, and I would recommend it to pretty much everyone. I could talk about this series for a long time, so could be a book club contender, just saying. If I actually do a book club, then maybe I'll do book club for Witch Hat Atelier. I still feel like that's not correct. Yes, so I thought that would be a really fun drawing to do for this watercolor. And for the actual drawing for the watercolor, I used references because the art style for this series is pretty different from my own art style. So I ended up just using references for pretty much the whole thing. I just arranged them differently. Most of the elements on my design were not together in their original designs. I just had a bunch of photos from the manga and kind of collaged them together to make a nice little composition, which I really tried to squish as much in there as possible because I just was like, oh, I should include this. Oh, I should include this. And then at the end I was like, maybe I should have made it simpler, but that's okay. It'll go on my wall, so it's fine. I like it either way. So one thing I wanted to do, so Quiffrey has sort of a off-white, cloaky type of outfit on, but on the top right specifically, it kind of reminded me of, like, if you're trying to make a piece of paper look like an old weathered letter or something like that, it would be very similar colors to these. So I was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to make it almost look like he's sort of floating off of an old document, was kind of the goal that I was going for, that he was seeping out of like a wrinkly old page with like words and stuff on it. So I used kind of like a more sepia brownish color for some of the shadows, like you'd get if you were using ink on an old parchment. I was happy with the way that turned out, to just sort of make it look like he was melting off the page, especially because the entire series is very focused around drawing these shapes, because that's how they do magic, is they draw these shapes, and then by drawing different patterns in the circles, they create different types of magic. And so I was like, oh, I would love to include some of the geometric patterny type elements into this drawing. And I also really, really wanted to draw some of the more villagey type aspects of it, because I love all of the backgrounds in the series. So I included the little buildings on the left, and then I drew their little home base down on the bottom right, which I think is just such a pretty design. I love how the house is just built into the side of the hill. It's just so pretty. Oh, fantasy architecture is just so fun to look at, especially when there's like mushrooms involved. Love it. I didn't really show too much color mixing in this video, because I almost feel like that'd be better to cover that separately. So let me know if you'd like to see some type of color mixing, or maybe I'll do something on my Patreon, like a tutorial on how to mix colors, color theory. I might do that, but yeah, let me know what you guys think, because I'm not an expert in color theory, but I understand it to a degree. I normally just like chuck purple into stuff though. If I'm like, this isn't the color I want, what should I add? I usually add purple. Honestly, like 75% of the time that fixes it. Like skin tone, it's like, I add purple, bam, that's the right color. Because when you mix skin tone, I will tell you how I mix skin tones. And a lot of times, like, you know, when you're a kid, you mix like brown and white to whatever degree, or just brown and something, you know, depending on what type of skin tone you're trying to get. And these days, I always start with yellow and purple. You could either start with yellow and purple or green and red, which I might go back to trying green and red, but if I'm gonna have an undertone, I'd rather it's yellow than green. So I usually start with yellow and purple, because if you use colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel, you'll get brown. So then it's a nice brown to start with, and you can kind of control whether it's a warm brown or a cooler brown, depending on which two colors you're mixing. I guess you could do blue and orange, but that brown's just gonna probably be darker, because blue and orange are both pretty intense colors. So I start with yellow and purple, and then I usually add in a red. And then if the red is too aggressive, then I add a little bit of green to kind of temper it down. And then I usually end up adding purple again at the end, and then just sort of play around with that mixture until I get the skin tone that I want. So that's usually how I do it. And if you want it less pigmented, then you just add water and then it's lighter. If you want it more pigmented, then you just don't add as much water and it's going to be a darker color. So that's how I mix skin tone. And then I think that's one of the harder colors to mix for me. One thing I try not to paint with is just straight black. If you paint with straight black, it tends to make it look like you have a hole in your paper, or it just looks like your eyes being sucked into one spot on the page. So I pretty much always mix black with either blue or purple, depending on the character. Like with Sung Jin Woo, I will mix in purple most of the time, or all of the black on his cloak and hair and stuff. Even though his actual hair, I'm pretty sure, is like just straight black, I always mix in a little bit of purple, because the shadows usually have a little bit of purple. Now that you've seen me paint on this canvas, I did want to talk about it a little bit more. As I mentioned before, you can kind of erase your mistakes more on this canvas than you can with regular watercolor paper, since it's more waterproof. The canvas itself has a triple water-based primed gesso on it, so it works well with watercolor and other water-soluble mediums like paint, different types of ink, gouache, acrylics, that kind of thing. I actually did use some acrylic pens on this at one point, and they worked really well on the canvas. I almost want to try again on a different canvas with just acrylic pens, just to see how they would work, because a lot of times with acrylic pens, even if they don't bleed onto the page behind whatever type of paper you're using, they still tend to pick up the paper and cause it to clump on itself, whereas on this type of canvas it definitely wouldn't do that. So I wouldn't mind trying out this canvas with some acrylic pens in the future, potentially. In general, yeah, you could erase your mistakes if you just took like a wet paper towel and kind of wiped at it, added some water and wiped at it. And then unlike watercolor paper that would probably crumble or curl or behave oddly underneath the water, this canvas didn't didn't get warped or warbly or dent or any. It didn't behave at all strangely, no matter how wet I got it. Now, I wouldn't submerge it in a pool of water, but you know, to a reasonable degree, this canvas did not react at all to water, did not react badly. And this also makes it easier to display in the long run, because a lot of times with watercolor stuff, the paper at the end is very bumpy, and I find it kind of hard to even frame it sometimes because the warbly parts will catch the shadows, so it can be kind of hard to see or kind of hard to photograph. But since this didn't warp or warble at all, you can display it straight on the wall straight away, and I didn't even have to wait for it to completely dry. So overall, it's a very different experience than working with watercolor paper, but there's definitely some positives to working with this that you wouldn't have if you worked with regular watercolor paper. So overall, I quite liked this palette. I, again, did not have any issues mixing the colors that I wanted, and I liked that it had the double-sided palettes so you could mix on either side depending. And it was nice because I've been using a different color palette for the last year or so, and it has more colors in it, so I've gotten a little lazy with my color mixing. So it was kind of nice to go back to this and have to mix more of my own colors, because I've kind of gotten out of the practice of it, I must admit. And I do like mixing colors. That's one of my favorite parts, because you start with only a certain amount of colors, and it's kind of like a little puzzle that you have to solve to mix all the colors to get the right colors. That's one reason I don't really like digital, because you just right off the bat have to pick the right color. You don't get to mix it. Boo. So to wrap up, if you're thinking of getting into color or you want to try color, I highly recommend watercolor. Plus, it's easy to travel with because unlike normal paint, if you spill it, I've spilled watercolor paint water before and it's not a big deal. Like, you just wipe it up. I wouldn't advise it, but it's not really a big deal. I spilled it on a couch one time and you couldn't even tell. It was a tragedy. I got in big trouble for that, but it was fine. It dried fine. It was good to go afterwards. If you are like out and about in the woods or something and you want to just sit down and start painting, then you can, and you don't have to worry about nasty dirty paintbrushes, because if the paint dries on the paintbrush, you just add water later and then it cleans up fine. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know, because I feel like I talked about a lot of stuff that was not the watercolor that I was painting. So upcoming videos to look forward to, I am working on an acrylic marker video, and I will have a behind the scenes video for the Evil Eye GG Don to Don thing that I just drew animation. I have a video, I just have not had time to edit it because I've been running around like a crazy person the last couple weeks. But yes, that video will come out soon, I hope. I really hope. And I feel like I have another video that I recorded that I haven't had time to edit. Oh, Black Butler. I have a Black Butler video which I'm very excited about. I just do not know when I'll get around to making it because I've got a lot of other stuff lined up. So hopefully, you know, in the next couple weeks, you'll see one or two of those videos. And one other update. So I mentioned on my last video that I have a Patreon now, and from anyone that signs up for my Patreon anytime from August 10th through September 10th, will be in the Don to Don theme. So if you sign for the Anbu or Jonin level tiers of my Patreon, you will be getting a little set of goodies sent to you, and they will be Don to Don themed for this month. I'll be announcing the exact things that will be coming in that set shortly, but for anyone curious, the theme for this month is going to be Don to Don. I want to try to finish a Momo drawing before, but I don't know if I'll have time next week. If I have time, she'll be included in the Patreon. If not, it'll just be Evil Eye. I think that's pretty much everything for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know, again, what kind of videos you would like to see. Keep that in mind for my next video, and as always, I'll answer comments, and I have everything linked in my bio. So, and I also have a link to the watercolor set in my bio as well as a coupon code from Phoenix Art Materials. Thanks again to them. I really enjoyed working with their watercolors, and I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. So, hope to see you on the next one. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching.